Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's edition of the Post-Gazette Live. I am, of course, Paul Zeise. Hopefully, you're all having a good day and things have gone well. Well, there has been a whole lot of stuff that's gone on today in Pittsburgh sports, and of course, we're going to get to most of it, hopefully all of it. But I think one of the biggest things is and he is going to be on, and we'll talk a little bit about Tristan Jarry, who is apparently now no longer a part of the Penguins' main roster, but we'll talk about that stuff in a little bit, obviously. Big news today is that Arthur Smith has been interviewing for jobs, which is kind of interesting in many ways because Arthur Smith is probably one of the guys that we here in Pittsburgh would consider to be public enemy number one. Now, it sounds like if you listen to Ray Fittipaldo and the guys that are doing the reporting on what's going on with the Steelers, it sounds like if there's any of the two coordinators in the crosshairs, it's going to be Teryl Austin, which I think is so unfair because, let's face it, Teryl Austin is running Mike Tomlin's defense, period. And so I think when we talk about that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that we're going to sit here and basically he becomes the sacrificial lamb. I don't care which other, if the people want to attack the line coach Meyer, they want to attack the secondary coach. There's guys like that. It's all irrelevant. I have to believe that position coaches, for the most part in the NFL, they know what they're doing. And, I think there's probably exceptional ones, but for the most part, I think they're all reasonably good. Now, there is an interesting report that came out from The Athletic. I'm sorry, not The Athletic. I guess it's the Pat McAfee show. Mark Caballi reported that Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith were not on the same page, did not have a good rapport, really kind of had to fight through some of their philosophical differences, and then Arthur Smith wanted Justin Fields to be his quarterback. Going forward, that could be a really, really pretty big topic, obviously, something to watch. So we're going to get into the Steeler talk in a little bit here. We've got a lot of stuff to get to with respect to the Steelers, but we've got a special guest. And as long as we have a special guest with us, we're going to jump in and talk to him, and that would be Andrew Destin. And, of course, he covers a number of things here for us at the Post-Gazette. Lately it's been hockey, but he's also our baseball writer. He's sort of a jack of all trades in many ways. And, Andrew, how are you doing? Let's hopefully you can hear me and I can hear you.
Yeah, got you. You got me, Paul?
I definitely have you. So we're already doing better than we did last week with Ray Fittipaldo, where I actually did an interview with him and talked to him, and I could not hear him. He could hear me, but I couldn't hear him. So I had to do, when his lips were done moving, and I would ask him another question. We played it off pretty well. But anyway, it is obviously a big day for the Penguins. You've been all over it, talking about the Penguins and the fact that Tristan Jarry is no longer, at least with the big club. He's, I'm assuming he cleared waivers, and now they're going to send him to Wilkes-Barre or something?
Yeah, so the way it works, Paul, is that with putting him on waivers today, the Penguins kind of announced that preemptively. So they practiced here in Cranberry at noon, and we were all counting up guys on the ice and realized that Tristan was nowhere to be found. But the deadline for putting guys on waivers or claiming guys on waivers is 2 p.m. Eastern time. So Tristan Jarry was placed on waivers effective 2 p.m. Eastern today. And now over the next 24 hours, teams around the NHL can put in claims if they would like to for Tristan Jarry. And if he goes unclaimed by 2 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow afternoon, then the Penguins would, in that plan, send him down to Wilkes-Barre, which he already has been with the Wilkes-Barre Penguins earlier this season. He went there for a 2-week conditioning stint, as I'm sure lots of Penguins fans know. Just my personal analysis and from talking to people around the organization and other reporters is that it's very unlikely that another team will claim Tristan Jarry just by virtue of he has 3 years remaining on his contract at a $5.375 million cap hit for each of the next 3 seasons, including this one. So any team that does claim him would be on the hook for all of that money. So if another team is willing to claim Tristan Jarry, the Penguins would be absolutely thrilled, but I would put that as highly unlikely at this juncture. As of right now, he's still with the Penguins, and that's my expectation for tomorrow afternoon as well.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is, was it a year ago in the offseason when they gave him that extension and signed him to a lot of money that a lot of people basically were just sort of like, has he really earned, the right to have a 5 or 6 year deal or whatever it is? So now they're in a place where they've got this contract that they've got to deal with. You've been covering the Penguins. You've obviously been around the team. You've seen, his ungodly, incredible ability to let the first shot he sees go in the goal. He's done it a bunch of times. I never thought he was your, franchise goalie, elite goalie that's going to get you over the top, but he was at least a good goalie. And he was at least at times a guy that they could, count on. What's really gone wrong with him? What is really going on with him?
That's the $1 million question, Paul. I mean, there's so many places to start with what exactly went wrong. I think the first place to start is last year with the injuries. We can talk about the contract, and certainly we can get into that later in this answer or some later questions. But the first place that I would go to is that he lost the net last year when they brought in Alex Nedeljkovic on a free agent contract in the summer of 2023 too. Nedeljkovic was supposed to be the clear-cut backup goalie to Tristan Jarry. And if you look at March and April of the 2023-24 season, I believe it was 12 or 13 straight games Nedeljkovic started. Jarry seeded the net. He got hurt for a little bit there. He got sick. He gave it up to Nedeljkovic, and that became his net, and the team rallied behind him and nearly made a miraculous run to the playoffs. So that's one place to start, was that I don't want to say that he lost the confidence of the team, but it became clear that this was a unit that was willing and able to play around other goalies as well. And then you go to this season, right? The start to the season couldn't have gone much worse. The conditioning stint with going back to Wilkes-Barre, where things trended in the right direction. But as you mentioned, there were so many times where it was the first shot on goal went in, or the second shot on goal went in. It became kind of like a mental crutch that Tristan Jarry seemed incapable of overcoming. And that's where we find ourselves in this current situation, is that I think it really became between the ears, between the eyes for Tristan Jarry. The talent is undeniable. This is a guy who's a 2-time All-Star. He, to some degree, earned the contract. I personally wouldn't have handed out a 5-year deal, but given the goalie market, how fickle goaltending can be, it's not like there were a lot of options out there. Kyle Dubas recognized that, thought it was still win-now mode, and proceeded accordingly. Now, in hindsight, certainly not a great contract, but I think really where this all went wrong is you can go back to March of last season. From that point onward, I think it became very clear that this was no longer Tristan Jarry's team. This was now a team that was in search of an identity in goal, and is still really in search of an identity in net.
So what happens now in terms of their contract, the contract? What happens with the contract now? They're kind of stuck with it, right? I mean, I don't know how much of it is guaranteed and not guaranteed, but they're kind of stuck with the lion's share of it, right?
Yeah, that contract there on the books for the only salary cap relief, if you want to call it relief, is that with Joel Blomqvist coming back up from the minors and theoretically switching spots with Tristan Jarry should he clear waivers, is that by flipping the two contracts, Blomqvist is certainly a much more affordable one at the NHL level, and by Jarry then going to the minors, and let's say, theoretically speaking, next season the Penguins buy out the remaining 3 years of his contract, it would kind of be like a Jack Johnson situation, which right now the Penguins are still on the books for a little bit of Jack Johnson's contract, but they're not paying all of it. They're not paying the lion's share for it. So as of right now, the bulk of that $5.375 million per year, the Penguins are on the hook for that. There is way they can gain some relief, but for the fact of the matter is that most of that money is going to have to be paid by the Penguins.
The biggest thing, Andrew, is if you think about this, goalies are fickle, like you said. Could there be a team that's, goalie starved that might just say, hey, the guy's been good at times. He's got talent. Maybe he just needs a change of venue, a change of scenery. Is there any chance that could happen?
Yeah, I think it is. It's very low chance, and there are a few teams that do come to mind. One, certainly, and talking to my colleague Matt Venzel here at the Post-Gazette, is the Carolina Hurricanes. They're a team that has kind of demonstrated over the last handful of years that it doesn't really matter who they have in goal. They've built a team that has defensive-first identity. They play a really responsible brand of hockey. They've become more offensive-minded as of late, and they have salary cap relief. They have a lot of room that they can work with. They would be able to take that contract on. Now, on the flip side of that, they've never really had a star goalie over the last handful of years. Do they really need to invest in a guy at $5 million in change? Not necessarily, but if they wanted to go that route, they would be a perfect example of a team that, in theory, could get the best out of Tristan Jarry. There are a couple of other teams that are rebuilding that maybe last year would have made a lot of sense. The San Jose Sharks are one. They've really struggled mightily as of late. The Anaheim Ducks are another, with Pittsburgh native John Gibson on roster for them. But both those teams have taken strides and think that they have their goalies of the future in the system or at the NHL level. So I don't know if those teams are as likely of candidates. But the Ducks, the Sharks, the Hurricanes, those would be three names of teams that come to mind for me that, I don't think any of them are by any means a shoo-in to get Tristan Jarry, but they're as good of a guess as any because I don't think many of the other 30-some-odd teams are going to be all that interested.
No, just sort of educate me here. If a team claims him off waivers, do they have to give something in return to the Penguins, like a draft pick or something?
Not at all. No,
so
Penguins.
So there's no risk, basically, other than the money.
The only risk is the money, which in a salary cap strapped league like the NHL is certainly a big risk. But for a team like the Hurricanes that is so fiscally responsible, has extra space, the salary cap in theory should be increasing by a good amount over the 2025 offseason, which maybe makes Jarry a little bit more desirable to other teams. I don't think it's particularly likely, but they wouldn't be on the hook for anything. No draft picks being sent back in return, nothing like that. It is strictly financial for any other team.
If you look at, this team, was it last Thursday, I think it was, when they had the big win against Edmonton, played one of their best games probably of the year, and you kind of said, okay, well, maybe they can build on this. And then they turn around, and I got to be honest with you, the game against Seattle last night was just sort of a disaster. But they lose to the Senators and look terrible doing it. Then they lose to Tampa in a game they probably outplayed Tampa. Do you think this stretch now where they've lost 7 of 8 is going to be sort of the definitive stretch where they decide now, you know what, we need to really make some wholesale changes? In other words, I think that, the trade deadlines are like a month away or whatever it is. I mean, is this sort of the point? Of course, most of these guys have no trade clauses, so I'm not sure exactly how you're going to break up the band, so to speak. I mean, is Mike Sullivan at some point, is his job in jeopardy? I just don't. I look at the Penguins and I don't know how much movement they can really have to make some drastic changes right now.
Yeah, I think to your point, Paul, this homestand for me, when I looked at the calendar, as any sports writer or fan does before the season, you look for those stretches that are going to be pivotal moments. I looked at this 5-game homestand as one, and conveniently enough, the 7-game road trip that follows immediately after. The Penguins are going to play 7 road games in 12 days across 3 time zones, starting in the East, then going out to the West Pacific time zone, then the Mountain time zone against Utah. I look at this second stretch coming up here as the critical one because let's say the Penguins go 2-5 across it or 1-6 and really lay an egg. I think it's entirely possible that after that you would say, okay, it's time to blow it up. The only reason that I would say that there aren't any trades imminent, and that's not to suggest that somebody couldn't be moved, but I think that what the Penguins are trying to do here is market these guys up as much as possible, especially the ones who don't have no trade clauses, and then hope you can get a couple of teams into a bidding war by the time the March trade deadline rolls around. There's still about 5-6 weeks to go until we get to that juncture, but I think what you're looking at is that, Marcus Pettersson is one name that certainly comes to mind, a responsible top 4 defenseman who can play with any offensive-minded blue liner. He is as good as they come in terms of being a responsible stay-at-home guy. Rickard Rakell, yes, he does have a more expensive contract than most, but he's had a career year and has looked excellent, and he doesn't have a no-trade clause. He's got a lot of term left on the contract. I believe it either 2 or 3 years remaining, but he is certainly a name that comes to mind. If Alex Nedeljkovic starts to pick it up, he's a backup goalie that most teams would like to have as their backup, not as a starter per se, but certainly could be a solid backup for them. Those are 3 names that certainly come to mind for me. Matt Grzelcyk, another defenseman they signed over the offseason, has really proved his worth on the power play. Could be a top 4 defenseman for a lot of teams, especially if paired with a more reliable stay-at-home guy. So there are guys they can trade. It's not per se the big name marquee, the big three players. Those aren't the ones they're going to be able to move on from, or frankly, at this point, with how much they've committed to them, should move on from. But there are ways to remedy the team. There are ways to improve the roster, and I think those kind of methods are going to be put to use here in the next 5-6 weeks.
When they fired Mike Johnston and hired Mike Sullivan, that was obviously a big move in and of itself. In the mid-season or whatever, they hired Mike Sullivan, they brought him up. I think he was at Wilkes-Barre or whatever. Brought him up. They made 2 or 3 in trades that brought guys in that were speed guys, basically, right? I think Trevor Daley might have, or I think he might have been one, and Hagelin might have been another guy they brought in, and they brought in one other guy, but. The other thing was they brought up 3 or 4 guys from Wilkes-Barre, that were young, fast. So they overhauled the roster and basically, added a ton of speed. And they brought in Mike Sullivan, who's obviously a guy who believes in speed, on the ice and likes to play that game. And of course, it changed their team completely from the way they were playing under Mike Johnston. My thing is, I don't know that they could even, if they brought in another guy. They got rid of Mike Sullivan and they brought in another guy who had a different philosophy. I just don't know that there's those kind of moves to be made that dramatic that all of a sudden we're talking about a Stanley Cup team.
Yeah, I don't think there are either, but I think what you are looking at with the roster, the way that it's constructed and the farm system is all of the guys pretty much who were acquired in that Jake Gensel trade. A good number of them are either close to being NHL ready or are NHL ready and could be put to use at this level. So Ville Koivunen, Vasily Ponomarev, those are 2 names that certainly come to mind. Some recent draft picks like a Tristan Bros. There are names of guys who are offensively minded, skilled players who have a lot of speed that are waiting in the minors. Now, I don't think any of these guys project as being anything more than middle 6 players, complementary guys, but they do exist down there, and if they make some trades, if they move off the likes of a Ricard Raquel, names like that, you certainly could have those kinds of opportunities. But to bring it back to an earlier point of trades to bring guys in at the NHL level, I will commend Kyle Dubas for this, is that he did make 2 trades with Nashville, one in the offseason and one during the season, to bring aboard Cody Glass and Philip Tomasino, 2 former first-round picks with a lot of speed and a lot of skill in that regard that have proven to be solid pickups. They're not franchise-changing, altering players by any stretch, but I think they can be part of a winning formula next year, the year after, et cetera. So I think the plan is kind of already in motion. It's to get younger, it's to get faster, and it's not necessarily to win this season. It might not even necessarily be to win next season, but I think we're starting to see the wheels in motion to really overhaul the roster, and there's already little snippets of it, or breadcrumbs, however you want to phrase it.
Well, I would be remiss before I let you go, Andrew, if I didn't tap your brains a little bit about the other team that you cover heavily. They signed a pitcher today, or they traded for a pitcher today for, I think it was cash considerations. And of course, the announcement was met with the usual cynicism of Pirate fans saying, World Series, here we come. They also signed it looked like a young shortstop or something from the Dominican, maybe, something like that. They made a couple of moves today, but Andrew, for the most part, this has been a very uninspiring offseason, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the right way of putting it. I think there's a lot of factors at play here, and this is not unique to the Pirates, quite frankly, and that's not to, dispel any emotions that Pirates fans may have, but I think a reality to come to terms with is that the disparity between the haves and the have-nots in Major League Baseball has never been higher. A lot of that is linked to the changing TV revenue that a lot of these teams have coming in. The Pirates in the Sportsnet Pittsburgh era, it's clear they're not making as much money as they were previously with AT&T Sportsnet. I think that is certainly a factor here. I bring that up to say that given the changing finances of Major League Baseball and the habits the Pirates have already demonstrated over the last handful of years, they were never going to be a big player in free agency. But even with that in mind, this has been an underwhelming offseason. They haven't done what they needed to do in terms of addressing the outfield sufficiently. They've added a couple of bullpen arms, a couple of intriguing guys, lefties, righties, et cetera. But yeah, in terms of the offense, it has the potential to be worse next year, which I can't really believe that I'm saying. I think the defense will be better, unquestionably, but I just genuinely don't see that outside of picking up Spencer Horwitz, how this team can be significantly better on the offensive side.
Yeah, well, I guess the hope is that Andy Rodriguez can hit a little bit and, whatever. But, that may now there was a report today I was going to get to you before, I don't want you to keep you too long because I know you're busy, but Brian Hayes, did he request a trade? Is that true? I saw that pop up on my timeline. There's so many sites now that quote unquote report on sports. I have no idea what's legitimate and what isn't anymore.
No, I can tell you with confidence, 100% not true. Checked in with Brian Hayes' camp. No validity to that statement. So I know the report you're talking about. It's actually a funny one. The account MLB Scoops, not one to be taken too seriously.
Okay, so I saw that pop up. I think most Pirate fans, and I'll let you, we'll let you go with this. Most Pirate fans are frustrated because with the rotation they have building, and if Skeens is who we think he is, and even Jared Jones is who we think he is, and Mitch Keller, can do what he does. There's a bunch of other names that are going to be in the rotation mix. In spring training, they're going to be able to have 7 or 8 deep, and 4 and 5 could actually be reasonably good pitchers. With that kind of rotation and the window that you have with Paul Skeens, it just feels like if you're gonna take some risks financially and kind of go for it, these next couple of years probably should be when you do it. Correct?
That's my thinking. I don't know if it'll necessarily be this year, but I think 2026 is a target year you could look at and say, hey, maybe that's one where they start to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of free agent spending, locking up guys long term. But to the Pirates' credit, they've made some investments. Some have looked better than others. Brian Hayes is on the books for a handful more number of years, albeit that contract is looking like a little bit of an albatross given the reoccurring back issues. Mitch Keller, at least you've solidified a guy who is a stable major league starter who can be the leader of a rotation, not necessarily the ace, but a leader of it. And Brian Reynolds is as consistent as they come on the offensive side of the ball. So that's not to say the Pirates haven't made some aggressive moves, financially speaking. There's at least 1 or 2 more, I think, in store over the next couple of years. I don't know exactly what those look like, whether that's within or outside the organization. But the way I see it is that they're never going to be that team that's supremely aggressive when it comes to money. But they're willing to spend. They've demonstrated the last couple of years. It's just, can they take it to that next level and be even a little bit more competitive with the spending?
Andrew, thank you so much for jumping on, taking some time. Hopefully we can do it again. I always enjoy talking to you, and we love to have you on the big show here. So great job as always, and you know what? Keep doing what you do.
Pleasure's all mine, Paul. We'll do it again soon. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you, man. That is Andrew Destin. He covers the Pirates and the Penguins for us, and of course he does a great job. Again, real quickly, the whole thing about Tristan Jarry that's really annoying is we talked about it last year when they signed him to this deal. There's a lot of people that want to give Kyle Dubas a pass, and I think he deserves somewhat of a pass for some of the things because he's just been hamstrung, but this was his baby. And so now it looks like it's a disaster. And they've got to figure out what they're going to do with Tristan Jarry and his contract. I don't anticipate anybody's going to take him off their hands. If someone does, that'd be great. That's the best case scenario here. But at the end of the day, if you really want to start evaluating Kyle Dubas, I mean, these are some of the kind of moves where you look at it and you say, you know what? This is a move he made that didn't turn out. And not only didn't turn out, but could hamstring this team for another year or two if it doesn't, if they don't figure out a way to get out from underneath that contract. Now back to the Steelers and the NFL, right? We were talking about Arthur Smith. There are some people that say, well, why is Arthur Smith getting, head coaching opportunities? Why are people talking to Arthur Smith? Why is he getting attention as a head coach candidate when, we think he wasn't very good this year as a offensive coordinator. Here's the thing about a guy like Arthur Smith. And this is something that some of these franchises like the Jets and some of these other franchises, they look at and they say, well, he's organized, he's structured, he's going to play a certain style of football that is going to give us an opportunity to hang in games and maybe even win some games. He's an NFL guy. He's safe. That's why Arthur Smith is getting interviews. I will be shocked if any of these teams actually hire Arthur Smith. But if you're, one of these teams and you're running, these interviews now, the biggest thing is You're basically don't want to leave any stone unturned. And for whatever you want to say about Arthur Smith, I know he was, what was he? I think he was 21-30 or something like that. 3 7-win seasons with the Falcons. His philosophy is sort of safe, sort of conservative. And there's a lot of teams that are, have been a disaster. And I'll give you a great example. I mean, a team, he was a team that should at least talk to him is Jacksonville, because that team was a total mess. Total mess. Jacksonville had, locker room problems. They had personnel problems. They had culture problems. They had, they were a team that beat themselves half the time. They didn't play, a style of football that gave themselves a chance to win. So these owners look at that and say, okay, I need to go out and find somebody who I think is going to be, able to add some structure to what we're doing. In the case of the Bears, right? Well, in the case of New England, there was a quarterback in place, and they went out and got a guy who I would tell you is the ultimate example of what I'm talking about, Mike Vrabel. He's the ultimate example of what I'm talking about. It's basically, a very safe hire for New England. He'll get them structured. They'll play tough guy football. They'll be fundamentally sound. He'll continue to build the defense and all the other stuff. That's what these owners are all looking for. They're looking for that guy, or they're looking for the guy like the Bobby Slowicks of the world, or the young, up-and-coming, innovative guy. It won't shock me if Cliff Kingsbury gets an interview or two. Even though he was a sort of a flameout in Arizona, the bottom line is what he's done in Washington. Everybody's looking at him saying, "Wow, his offense. Look what he's done with this young quarterback." I mean, if you're the Bears, you probably should want to talk to him, because your needs are, we need to find somebody that can develop Caleb Williams, that can build an offense that's exciting, that's innovative, that's all this other good stuff around the talents of Caleb Williams. And you look in Washington and you say, boy, Cliff Kingsbury, maybe he grew up. Maybe he learned something from the, experience in Arizona. And now, looking at him working with Jaden Daniels, look at what he's done with a young quarterback. He's had an innovative offense. It's been a lot of fun. That's why a guy like that will get probably a couple, of interview opportunities. But, if there are some teams like the Jets, Jacksonville, in some ways even the Raiders, they might benefit from having Arthur Smith for 2 or 3 years. Now, bring Arthur Smith now back to the Steelers. To me, it sounds like the Steelers are going to make some changes on their coaching staff. It sounds like it. And, Ray Fittipaldo was saying that, he thinks that there's a chance Terrell Austin could be the guy that becomes the sacrificial lamb. I don't know if that's true or not. And, I don't know if that's where they're going to go. I would tell you, I don't think that's a good – I don't think it's fair, put it that way, because I think Terrell Austin's a really good coach, honestly. And I think that he knows what he's doing. And the other thing is he's not running his own defense. He's running the defense for the head coach. I think if you look at it, Grady Brown is a secondary coach. Anthony Midget, the assistant secondary coach. If you look at what, these are guys that, to me, I don't think it really matters that much, does it? It really doesn't. Alfredo Roberts, the tight ends coach. Moving on from him, does that really change much of anything? Zach Evgeni, okay, if you want to tell me that the receivers underachieved or whatever, the reality is, unless they're going to change the offensive coordinator, I really don't want to hear about any of these other changes, honestly, because they're all just sort of window dressing. They don't mean really anything. And I would include Pat Meyer in that. Because whatever you want to say about Pat Meyer, yeah, Broderick Jones hasn't developed the way you want Broderick Jones to develop. But here's the thing. If you look at, for instance, Mason McCormick, if you look at Zach Frazier, they've come along. Maybe the problem is Broderick Jones and not Pat Meyer. Maybe they have the wrong tackle in Broderick Jones. And, if I was watching Ben Roethlisberger's podcast thing, that he does with, what's that guy's name? Spence or whatever his name is, it's actually pretty good because Ben is actually pretty candid. And one of the things he says, watching a lot of film, he saw a lot of mistakes by Broderick Jones made a lot of mistakes. Now, is that Pat Meyer? Because the other guys on the line seem to be able to figure out what they're supposed to do. Maybe just Broderick Jones is the problem. And if he's the problem, it's a real problem because you invested a first-round pick in him. And not just that, you traded up to get him. So my thing with that is, if you want to tell me that they're going to move on from Pat Meyer because, Broderick Jones and Dan Moore, they didn't get better or whatever, okay, fine. But you're not changing anything about the Steelers. The one move you could make that would be significant in terms of a change is moving on from Arthur Smith. Because the big thing there is if he wasn't seeing eye to eye with Russell Wilson, and we kind of know sort of, what wasn't working and what wasn't gonna happen for him. I don't know. If you're gonna bring Russell Wilson back, do you really want to bring Russell Wilson? Do you really want to bring Arthur Smith back? I mean, this doesn't make a lot of it. It doesn't really, mean a lot to me. But I would like to see an actual move that's significant. And the only significant move is Arthur Smith. Now, it's kind of interesting. Like I said, Mark Cabali, who works for the Pat McAfee show, he wrote, despite Wilson and Smith spending countless hours together after the typical workday watching film and publicly joking about it, a team source recently said that Wilson and Smith did not have a very good working relationship, but fought through their differences as the best they could. And also that Arthur Smith was really all in on Justin Fields. Now, if you want to tell me that they're going to come back and Justin Fields is going to be the guy and we're going to see completely different offense and an offense that's built around his talents, okay, I might listen to Arthur Smith coming back. But to me, I think the Steelers need something completely different. They just do. And Arthur Smith is the logical guy to move on from. You move on from him. You bring in a younger, more innovative coordinator or somebody who really understands read option and all that stuff, right? You bring that guy in. And you make Justin Fields your quarterback. And then you go and you sign some guys in the offseason to make your receiving core better. That's what you have to do. And as we talked about the other day, if that means trading Minkah Fitzpatrick or trading even TJ Watt, I would do it to free up money to be able to sign quarterbacks, cornerbacks, and wide receivers. I think when you look at it from the standpoint of where the Steelers need help, those are the two areas they need help. I think you can get Russell Wilson probably for $20 million. I don't think I'd go more than like 25 for him. And I think you could get Justin Fields for 12 to 15, honestly, because he really doesn't have a body of work where he's got a lot of leverage. But I would like to see that. I would like to see a movement away from this ultra-conservative philosophy on offense. I'd like to see them either, walk into Arthur Smith's office and say, listen, we need you to build an offense around Justin Fields, similar to what they did in Washington around Jayden Daniels. We need you to figure out a way to maximize his talent. And we need to figure out a way how to, bring him along where we develop him as a passer, but we are still able to be dynamic on offense because we take advantage of everything he does with his legs. That's what I would tell you is the move to make. Now, again, it goes against the Steelers' nature. It really does. And I think that's going to be the biggest issue, is that if the Steelers don't change, if they don't change their philosophy on offense, guess what? We're going to be sitting here next year at this time talking about a team that either misses the playoffs or is one and done again. And that's that. I see a lot of people that are ripping. I see a lot of people that are ripping Terrell Austin. Again, he's running the defense that he's being told to run. I mean, if you got a problem with the defense, don't look at him. Look at the guy in the top seat. The guy that seems to be Teflon. We're going to start calling him Teflon Tomlin, right? You remember John Gotti? The feds kept, bring him into court. And he kept winning. And eventually, I think it was the New York Daily News and the New York Post, they labeled him the Teflon Don. Yeah, that's sort of becoming Mike Tomlin, the Teflon Tomlin, Teflon Mike. Bottom line is, I don't know what else has to happen before the Steelers understand that there seems to be a ceiling with Mike. There seems to be a ceiling. He's really good at getting them to slop together 9 or 10 wins every year and have a chance at the playoffs. But beyond that, not much else. And I think that's the biggest problem, I have at least, looking at the whole situation. So to me, when we sit here and we talk about Mike Tomlin and the Steelers and everything else, the only thing that matters to me, are they going to make a major change on offense? Are they going to make it? Because it doesn't matter who they bring in. It doesn't. Last year they had, was it last year or the year before, they had Brian Flores and Terrell Austin, right? And Mike Tomlin. 3 defensive gurus. And basically, Mike Tomlin admitted that when things get tough in the season, he takes over the defense and the play calls and all that other stuff. I think the other thing that came out of Ben Roethlisberger's podcast the other day was him talking about the fact that Mike Tomlin is the guy in the organization that basically is the guy who is responsible for making big decisions with respect to personnel. And so, the people that want to give him a pass, well, look at this roster. I mean, Chris Sims, the former quarterback, is saying, oh, well, I think they've overachieved. If they've overachieved, it's because they haven't put together a good enough roster. And if they haven't put together a good enough roster, guess who that's on? That's right, Mike Tomlin. Obviously with the help of Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, but at the end of the day, Mike Tomlin has the final say. So this is a situation that needs to start with, what do the Steelers want to be? What do they want their offensive philosophy to be? That's what it needs to be in this offseason. It can't be 3 yards in a cloud of dust, because the bottom line, as much as they put in between the line and the running backs and the offense and hiring Arthur Smith, to be this great, dominant rushing team, do you know what they are? A team that's not very good at running the football. So, if you look around the NFL, nobody's playing that way. Even the Ravens have Derrick Henry. And guess what? They run the ball a lot just from the standpoint of they've got a running quarterback, but they're dynamic in their passing game now too. I mean, the Steelers played them this week without Zay Flowers. If Zay Flowers is back this week, it changes their offense altogether. That's what happens. But even they are not playing that way. I mean, you look at the playoffs and the way that things are going, right? There are three in the AFC. There are 3 teams left. 4 teams left. 3 of them have a dynamic quarterback in Jackson, Allen, and Mahomes. And the 4th team has a young guy. He's a second-year guy who's actually pretty good in C.J. Stroud. And be honest with you, had they not lost Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs and a couple of other guys on offense, that team probably would be pretty dynamic on offense too. Those are the teams that are still playing. You go to the other side, you've got the Rams who, they just seem to do with smoke and mirrors, but at the end of the day, they've got a quarterback who's won a Super Bowl who's probably a Hall of Famer now. What he's done with the Rams, combined with all the numbers that he put up in Detroit, Matthew Stafford is probably a Hall of Famer now. Jared Goff is a guy who throws for 4,500 yards or whatever every single year, since he's been the starter in Detroit. I mean, that's just sort of who they are. Jaden Daniels, that offense is fun. It's exciting. They play at a really, really exciting brand of football built around a quarterback who right now is not a great passer, but they've made their offense built around the fact that he's got some skills that, most guys don't have. And the hope is that as he goes through it the next couple of years, they'll develop him as a passer and he'll become Lamar Jackson light. So if you look around, and the Eagles are a team that they are sort of built around their running back, but in Saquon Barkley, but he's sort of an ultimate weapon kind of guy. He's sort of a guy that they use in a lot of different ways, and he's kind of the exception. The Steelers don't have Saquon Barkley. They don't have anyone close to Saquon Barkley. They don't have anybody who is anywhere in the same league as Saquon Barkley. So all I'm trying to say is I keep hearing for the last couple of days this is what they need to do. This is what they need to do. Listen, now that it's clear Mike Tomlin is back, 1, and that they have interest in signing Justin Fields and or Russell Wilson, and probably both. Now is the time that you look at what ailed this team and you say this: we're no longer a dominant defense. We're no longer elite on defense at all. We're not elite at all. And we can no longer rely on trying to win games 13-10 or 17-10 because it's just unrealistic to do week after week after week, and then especially when you get into the playoffs. By the way, the game is always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's. Archie's, the home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's. When you get there, tell Archie that I sent you. Archie's on Carson Street. Again, they have all the games going on all weekend long. It's a great place to go watch football, eat wings, and enjoy yourself. Or a lot of other food. All of Archie's food is great. So get down to Archie's. I just think that, again, I hear all these changes people want made. The only one that matters to me is either the offensive coordinator goes and they bring in somebody who's younger and more innovative and a little less of a safe conservative choice, or they basically bring back Justin Fields and make sure that Arthur Smith understands the assignment is to build a dynamic offense around Justin Fields and his talents. I don't know if that's possible. But that's what needs to happen. Really. And so it's going to be interesting just kind of to see what happens over the next few weeks. Now, when Mike Sullivan speaks, it's always funny to me. I think he spoke yesterday, right? All these days run together. What's funny to me is he always speaks like 2 days after the season, and then you don't hear from him again till OTAs. But at the end of the day, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. So his speech yesterday really was kind of a waste of time. But he does it by design. Now he's meeting with his coaches. There'll probably be some announcements of some coaches. They're moving on from this guy or that guy, whatever. But it's funny. They didn't do that. They did not do that. Okay? Did not do that. After this week, where he could actually answer questions and talk about the decisions that he's making and why, he's going to move on from certain guys and why other guys are going to stay, all that stuff, some personnel decisions, which they'll have a better, grip on over the next week or two. At the end, he doesn't ever have to address those things at the end of the season thing. So with that, I feel like you've got to note that nothing has been said yet that isn't a surprise. But if you ask me, absent of either a change in offensive coordinator or a very tangible, he's going to stay, but he understands what the assignment is for next year, and that is to build a dynamic offense around Justin Fields. Outside of that, I'm probably not all that interested in whatever they're going to do to make changes. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I enjoyed myself. Thanks to Andrew Destin. We'll do it again tomorrow at 5. But again, think about those things that I just talked about when it comes to the Steelers. And that is, they basically are not going to make any dramatic moves unless they're willing to shake up, and I mean really shake up their offense and their offensive staff.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.